Hello, this is the voice of Stewart Pearce, and welcome to Deep Dialogues, a series of vital conversations that I have with global soul stewards from all over the world who provide us with an understanding of how we can create a new hierarchy of values that is absolutely significant at this unique time of becoming. I hope you enjoy, and thanks for listening. So, ladies and gentlemen, I have sitting in front of me, beside me, all around me, because she is the most extraordinary lady who I want to introduce you to formally through her wonderful bio, and then you'll get to know her. If you don't already, you probably already know all about her. So this is Pamela Aaralyn. Is that correct pronunciation?
Yes.
Yeah, Aaralyn. And Pamela is a world-renowned channel, mystic, spiritual teacher, devotee of sacred sound, and a writer within the field of consciousness and mysticism. Pamela channels Christ-conscious beings, and she is devoted to undoing the painful behavioral patterns that modern culture has created for humanity. There are many wonderful links that we will provide for dear Pamela. And so don't worry about this wonderful surname that she has, which everybody always misspells, because this will go into the chat box and go into a former at the bases of this wonderful video. Pamela, dear friend, soul sister, hello.
So wonderful to have you. I've been so excited to see you again and just to sit in this melting pot of joy and enlightenment that you present to the world. And I'm happy for your book. Oh my goodness, I'm so happy for its success. And oh, wow, just so much energy there for the divine feminine coming through, Diana, with you. And I just wanted to take a moment to thank you for all of the hard work, the devotion that you took to give this to us.
Oh, bless you. I mean, bless you. I'm very touched by that. It's a huge honor, you
It's
know,
hard
that
work.
this thing, this spiritual being having a human experience would become a vessel for this immense awakening. And the awakening is an extraordinary state of becoming, isn't it? As we feel the arousal of the divine feminine, both within us and also, of course, within the enormity of the way that the illusion within our world is being moved into the temperance of transparency. And I know that you have a very unique communication with the substance of what the divine feminine is about in our lives, and particularly through oneness consciousness. And I wonder if you could possibly explain to us your particular perception and your skills and craft around the oneness of Christ consciousness.
Mm, it's so wordless. It's beyond any human definition that I could potentially conjure for you, but it is the essence of the miracle as you awaken to the love that you are. In my personal experiencing in this lifetime, at least, um, that question can only be answered by the arousal of the divine feminine within each of us to the point where we can perceive ourselves with love and only love, to give and only receive. It is the epitome of compassion, and it's lived. I can't talk about it, I can't teach it to you, and you can't learn it. It's lived, it's accepted, it's resolved deeply within you. The moment you get tired of fighting it, there's this constant patriarchal system that says, be this, be that, do this, do that, and that is the being that you should be, and that's of the mind. And as a lover of intellect and philosophy, I love the mind, and I love when it listens more strongly to the heart.
Amazing, amazing. And of course, as we know, with the dynamism of what it is to live within the prism of our hearts and feel the love giving and receiving, that we have imprints that are very fearful of receiving. We tend to action ourselves through doing, and giving. But to receive, I mean, for example, I was speaking with a major soul steward yesterday in the world and complimenting them on the enormity of what they were doing. And they found it very difficult to receive this, and moved into the behavioral feature of not listening to me. And I thought, this is extraordinary, because I'm giving all of this love. I'm saying some very beautiful things, like, if you could hear, I hear the angelic chorus singing in wonder of all that you're giving us, all that you're contributing to us in our lives. And they completely ignored me. So I thought, I'm going to hold them on this one. So I did actually bring them to a point of, well, why do you feel it's so challenging for you to receive? Is that something that you've also experienced in your work, that people find it difficult to receive love?
Oh, yes, and I too. It's conditioned that the Christ consciousness is built upon meekness. Even the Bible, who so many, practice and love and read, would say to you that Jesus was meek and that we should be meek. And I remember the first time, another teacher sat before me and she said, "How much of your mind do you feel that you use?" And I just went, "What?" She said, "Well, 10%, 15%, 20%. And I said, I don't know. She said, "Well, don't know. You can't know this. What do you feel?" And I said, "Well, I'm getting visions of a time, perhaps another era of a past life incarnation wherein I was perceived as a saint." And she said, "Oh, the sainthood mind." And I said, "Well, wait now. I don't feel that way right now." And that was the beginning of my awakening. And she said, "Well, why not?" And I said, "Because I'm just not humble enough, my friend. It's not, and the ego's too big. I don't think that I'm a saint." And she said, "Well, do you think that you should be meek? That's what Jesus said to you throughout all these years, is to be quiet and humble, and that's what he would want from you?" And I knew the answer was no, but I couldn't quite take in what she said. It just kind of, I felt like a deer in the headlights.
Mm. Mm.
When a wise teacher first said this to me, and I went, "Huh? No, he says no." She said, "What does he say?" I said, I don't know. I can't. Right? I don't. So conditioned, hearing all these childhood voices come back. "Sit down, be quiet. Children are to be seen, not heard. Oh, sit there in your pretty dress. Don't get dirty." Oh, yeah, sing, make beautiful music, and then shush, 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 shush. Don't. That's what we're taught, right? And she said, "No, Jesus told my dad once to be glorious." Her dad is a pretty renowned ACIM teacher. And I was like, "What? To be glorious?" Yeah, shine. The saints were shining. They were very just shining that love. There was nothing meek about them. And it floored me.
Interesting one, my darling. Interesting one. Because I'm very much of the priest warrior context. And a lot of people say, "Oh, you're very much a spiritual warrior," because I know that we speak truth, and we live by the counsel and the countenance of truth. So we're constantly measuring our own responses of, is this the greatest truth? Quintessentially, is this the greatest love that I can summon in this moment? And of course, as you and I both know, that part of it can be immensely pliant and soft and lyrical, as are those wonderful archetypal qualities of the divine feminine. But then when we become aroused, and so thinking of the master, thinking of Yeshua, the great Christ master, the Christos master, there's that wonderful story in Luke of when he walked into the synagogue and saw the synagogue being used by the money changers and the tax collectors. And it says in Luke, quote unquote, he overturned the tables and gave a great shout and picked up a whip. It doesn't actually say he hit anybody, but I bet in Indiana Jones style, he gave the air a great crack to get people moving. And of course, they adhered to what he was. So it sort of gives a purpose for divine anger, doesn't it? That
Yes.
anger can be used in a self-righteous way to say, no, this is inappropriate, this is inaccurate, which is very different from, no, this is wrong. you're wrong. And what are you going to do about it? You know, all of that, all of that stuff, which is, of course, as we know, in our anger usage, that's merely a projection of a wound within us, rather than how can we change this situation perceptibly so that we move into a much greater crucible of what love is all about. It's an interesting equation right now, isn't it? Because there's so much anger in the world
Mm.
through blame culture and what I'm calling the revenge complex, you know,
Mm.
that we've been conditioned by.
We're playing it out right on the stage. It's very Shakespearean, is it not?
It's full of drama, yeah, it's full of drama. And of course, Shakespeare's teaching is so much about the polarities, you know, where we see all of the heightened nature of the drama, and then hopefully we're going to have a sense of recovery over here where people start loving themselves. You know, it's the great story of Romeo and Juliet, isn't it? Two beautiful young lovers living in a desperately violent society. So, you know, bearing in mind the feature of blame and revenge that is around, I know you have some exquisite programs that you use to help people through what their crises may be about, well, don't you think that was rather revenging? How can we heal revenge? I don't know if there's anything that comes to your mind in this moment that you could elicit for us of how you heal revenge.
You know, sometimes I'm not so sure that people want that. It's almost as if the statement of, I don't know if you of course, you may remember this time when people would say, what is the statement? This does not move me. Is that it? This too does not move me. And people were always looking for something that passionately arouses them, or looking to simply relish the quiet, right? And when all of these seasons of change began recently in, early 2020, everyone was moved and shaken and passionately like, no, I am a free sovereign being. And I was excited. I don't know how you felt at that times, but I was like, oh, super. This is different. You guys have been just kind of muddling around for a little while, wondering if that was happening, but now it's apparent. And now what are you going to do? And then the mind sort of began to take over. I could feel the collective mind get angrier and angrier and begin to shift that revenge into a blaming. And initially that was towards governments, and now it's towards each other. Now it's you don't take this medicine, you're responsible. Or you don't cover your face, you're responsible. Or you do, you're responsible. Either way. And there's this perception of division, and people are taking that out on each other. So it's not something that I've really perceived you can heal, but it's something that it just runs its course until you say, wow, we've been mightily distracted.
Yeah.
Where have we gotten with that? We've lost friends, family, loved ones, lovers. When all of the Christ conscious beings have explicitly told us that everyone is our lover.
Mm-hmm.
So now that statement of this doesn't move me, now everything does move me. And it moves me towards compassion, which is not a healer. It's just the ultimate reminder of our wholeness, of the fact that everything we're seeking, which is connection, cannot be remembered when you're turning away your brothers and sisters everywhere. So I invite everyone just to seek that peace. If you're going to seek something, to seek such peace within you that you forgot that revenge would even be applicable. And that's not a process of anything I can offer you today, but I just ask you to ask yourself, how's that working for you, that feeling? And to be completely honest, to just lay your feelings on the table, give your heart to Divine Mother, and ask yourself honestly, is this working in my life? When I wake up every morning, I feel this. When I go to bed every night, it's all these thoughts of pain are rolling around in my head. Do I want to keep living this way? That's it. You don't choose again.
Yes. Yeah.
process of choosing a different frequency that you can place behind your thoughts. And when, if you can't, and this is something that Kuan Yin recently shared with me in a channeling, she said, if you can't love them, forgive them. If you can't forgive them, show compassion.
Yeah. 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 So those two instruments are so crucial, aren't they? The pathway of forgiveness leading us to the empathic nature of compassion. And what I'm finding, I'm reminding people all the time of, well, okay, so this is taking place in your life when they're describing the drama that's going on the outside of their beings and the way that they're reacting to it. And so I'm sure you employ this as well, I speak about the difference between reaction and response. And that if we're reacting, we're merely reacting something that we've always acted before, which is often the revenge complex or blame and accusation. Whereas if we can detach, feel stillness, and observe, we move into a different behavior where we respond through compassion because we realize that the person who's getting antsy in front of us is actually going through an internal storm, a drama of conditioned response, conditioned reflexes. And that if we can just simply calm it all down, earth ourselves, so that we don't constantly keep triggering all of that adrenaline and cortisol in our bodies that brings us to got to attack, got to defend, got to. I find myself measuring myself all the time to take a breath, detach, feel stillness, observe. Okay, what's really going on here? Because, as we begin to change our social organisms, our social systems, it seems that many people, as they withdraw, are trying to find ways of developing conversations with social systems where often there's a conflict because the money is not arriving. They're being asked to pay much more tax than they usually do, and how we approach the systems that are governing us, who are obviously in terrible fear as a result of the fact that unconsciously everybody knows that we're unplugging to discover our own sovereignty. It's no longer appropriate to plug into that. We're unplugging to discover how we can plug back into source. And of course, that's quite a sophisticated linguistic on a feeling level, isn't it?
It
But
is.
through stillness, we can do it. When you scan all the people that are coming to you at the moment, because I know that there are hundreds and hundreds of coming to you, do you see that there's a corollary in their behavior? Are there common themes or elements that keep popping up? You keep finding yourself saying, yes, but there's another perception, and this is.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. I wanted to address for a moment, if you don't mind, before I answer that question, since you asked about a process regarding how to not react and to know the difference between response and reactivity. I've observed that many people don't know how to quiet inside in a moment of stress. That's really common, that there's been so much stress for the past couple years now that the neurological system is burned out. And when that's going on, it's very difficult because it's the physiological system that's responding, correct? And when that happens, people are simply looking for a way to get back in what they perceive as empowerment, because it's really the only way to calm down a neurological system when it's been plummeted for so long and it's so exhausted from being overworked and overtalked and overdoing and overbeing, and if there's such a thing as that, but the world tries to teach us that it is. But it's hard to have access to a miracle when all that's going on. And I noticed that you mentioned breath, and that is my first go-to. I don't count my breaths, but I do say the word one. I don't count it in any up or down fashion, but I just move the breath along the spine from the base of the spine to the top of the head. And as I'm breathing, I imagine that breath going up the spine. And as I'm doing that, I will just gently recite one over and over again, one, and I feel my breath moving up. When it hits this area, I find it really important to just retain the breath as if it's right there around the pineal gland, just to hold it for a minute, just for a few seconds, and then a long, slow yoga breath And this is just a gentle pranayam. It doesn't take long, but a long, slow yoga breath down. And then you just do that until you don't want to talk anymore. Because our first initial instinct is to speak, to react, to say something, defend yourself, like you said, attack, right? So I do that until I have nothing to say, until the mind just goes blank, no matter how long that takes. And typically speaking, the person before me will just kind of stare at me for a moment and say, okay, you all right? You have anything to say? They want to keep plugging at me until I respond, right? Give me a minute, give me a minute. I'm not ashamed to ask, give me a minute. I'm putting my thoughts together, but they don't know differently. I'm putting my breath together. I'm using the ultimate mastery that all of the wise masters have utilized and reminded us of, and we just keep forgetting of that importance.
Yeah.
Just to do that. So that's my one process that I can recommend today. But here's the second process if you can't do that. If you just can't do that, someone's just got you in that moment, which is often these days, right? It's easy to fall into that. If you must speak, ask a question. Any question will do. So what that looks like if someone's saying, well, have you been vaccinated right now? Are you doing the responsible thing? And I just say, tell me a little bit more about why that question is important right now to you. What do you feel that you and I have a close enough bond for you to ask that question of me? Another empowering. So what you're doing is you're taking that painful spotlight that they have put on you, and you're simply shifting it back. Whatever spotlight has gone in your direction, you shift it away, breathe, and then ask a question. And then go back to the one technique that I just shared with you. And that's just two of the things that I do when I'm feeling that way, to kind of calm my mind down so my neurological system stops acting like fireworks.
Yes, yes. And of course, we've been awakened for some time as initiates, haven't we? You and I, and the people, a lot of the close people around us. And we've been practicing meditation for many, 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 many years. And of course, actually, we know that all of that direction that we were given by our teachers, or whatever the teachers may be, they may have been the medicine world of the shamanic practice, that we know that we've actually been preparing our neurological pathways for now.
Right.
So that there's a calmness and a stillness within, knowing full well that God and the divine lives within the stillness, not within the action. It's we who are given the task on this extraordinary planet to bring the divine into action. That the God doesn't need to get dynamic. So the stillness with the breath is the key, that wonderful moment between breathing in and breathing out. So I'm absolutely thrilled that we're talking about this, because guess what I've just been doing? I've just been in the recording studio recording another special meditation, which is all about what we've just exchanged. So it's within the psychic membrane, isn't it? It's in the psychic network, but there you are. And I was using the wonderful Kundalini Yoga mantra of God is me is God, we are one. And how I constantly saying that rearranges the neural pathways. If we've just discovered meditation, and of course you and I know it's not just simply about being silent in meditation. A lot of people find that rather difficult. It can be being in nature with one's back against a tree, or next to a beautiful watercourse, or looking into the face of one's love, one's child or one's lover, and seeing the stillness that's there, and realizing all is okay and all will always be okay. But
You're starting to sound like all the great nature mystics, Thoreau and Whitman and Richard Jeffries, I believe is
yes,
more indigenous to your area.
yes, yes, yes. And of course, many of them were living in a time where they were much more connected with breath, much more connected with pranayama, and much more connected with the vital force of nature. And recognizing the divine mother would be, if she was sacralized rather than desacralized, that she would always be there to support us. Yeah,
Mm.
yeah. So there are many ways through and in and around and back to that crystalline presence of our own sovereignty, where we can feel this. And is there any other particular themes that may be popping up for you?
Insofar as what you asked prior, I am noticing a theme. I find that there seem to be categories of thought right now, three of them. One of them is I don't know. I don't want to know. Um, I want to feel. I feel compassion for what's going on in the world. You know, some of my, really deeply mastered students are in this right now. They're like, you know what? I hear what the world is saying to me. I'm listening. I don't turn a deaf ear. I am compassionate towards the plight. I am in deep quiet as well as in deep action. I'm volunteering of my time and of my efforts and of my wisdom. So many of my yogis in my programs and shamans and healers and whatever you want to call yourselves, you are just in deep service to humanity right now. And I just wanted to take a moment to thank you for that. It's a deep theme for a lot of my adepts right now that have gone through my trainings and programs. And I'm just so deeply grateful because, as many of the masters stated throughout, I think it was Lao Tzu who created that concept of the way is all ways, and who was it? Carolyn Mace that recently said we are walking each other home. And it just reminded me of that journey that we all make when you see these, lamas in training walking the Great Wall together and stopping at little towns to eat. Have you ever read about any of their journeys and their stories when they're meeting each other and suddenly they just become more than people who have jobs or kids? They're people who are seeking the love that they are. And they're all doing it together. They're all tired together. They're hungry together. When they're afraid together. And I'm finding that theme to be really relevant right now, that people are stopping for a moment to say, you know what, I'm tired of fighting systems. I'm tired of reactivity because I'm exhausted from it. And I just want to walk with my fellow brethren and remember love. I just want to do it all the time. Not in a way that turns a blind eye, but I just want to do it all the time. So that's one category, which I'm ever so grateful of thought that I notice. Another is, yeah, I want to do that, which means I have created a meaning for myself and my thought systems of turning a blind eye, not performing any action at all, rolling up my carpet, closing my garage door, and keeping to myself. And then I noticed that theme as well. Leave me alone is that theme. Have you noticed that one? No, I'm too empathic for this, This is bothering me too much, which I believe is crucial in the beginning. There's a recovery point in the physiological system. It's completely understandable. Yet I find that it should only last for so long. We're all in this together, and we can't just keep rolling up our carpets and closing the door and saying, go away, world. Well, you know what? We created it. And it's time to come together to shift together. So that if we want something out here to change, we got to change in here together and walk each other home. And there's the other smaller category. I don't come across this often, but it's a venom. It is. I can't even explain it better than that. It's just this pure venom towards the world of these hierarchical sides of left and right, and in my country, blue and red states, and vaccine or not, mask or not, as if that's the surface that they're scratching angrily at the surface, and until they scratch and bleed with each other. I see that in a smaller capacity, but I do still see it.
So we're seeing the importance of stillness, and that actually, if we claim the space of the hermitage, of being silent, and of withdrawing from the world for a certain amount of time, it's really important because the stress levels are up. It's interesting that we haven't necessarily seen fully the gift of COVID, which is an ironic or bizarre thing to say, because after all, she has been so destructive. But at the same time, we know that we were given the opportunity of moving into, I mean, most people call it global lockdown. I was saying, no, global pause, global pause, global pause, that we're actually being given the opportunity to hunker down, to get still, and to really listen to what is Divine Mother saying to us, what is the Great Gaia saying to us, because she knows how to deal with the fearsome nature of COVID. so that we can become still and breathe that altering breath, where our breath is not taxed by what was seen to be viral, and which was really merely a promulgation of another aspect of our stress nature.
Mm-hmm.
And so we can really just come back into that stillness, because we know that actually the measuring of how we can be the change you want to see in that space of being, that space of internal resolution, of coming back to all those precepts that are most important, but not as ideas, as somatic sensations, that automatically we see miracles taking place. Particularly over the last 2-3 years, as you know, I've interfaced with female cancer for the last 40 years because of the rite of passage that I went through with my own darling mother, who she and I had this huge soul connection. And she chose to pass bitterly and acrimoniously through that devastating disease, which then eventually pervaded all the way through her body. And she just got smaller and smaller and smaller and smaller, as though she was walking out of an internment camp, at the end of the Second World War. So that was a huge, huge teaching for me, and what came up within me as I was nursing it. So what I've actually noticed with so many of the wonderful women who are coming, who are saying, well, look, I've been told I've got 3 months to live, that they're actually able to make a quick shift into finding greater stillness, to drop into, as it were, subatomic particles, to discover, well, where is the fear lurking within my body? Where is the anger? Where is the displacement? Where is the abandonment lurking that has brought me to this conflict? And therefore, finding the prayer has this powerful resonating effect that often changes much more than the doing, although, as we know, that can be useful as well, in the sense of, do I need to have a massage done to me? Do I need to change the levels of my nutrition? Doing. So all of that's very important, isn't it? Because we literally detoxify or depoison our bodies. But then to go into the substance of prayer and recognizing that the stillness opens us to those neural pathways right into the mind of God, and that God is ready and waiting for us to make those prayers so that miracles can happen. And finding remissions happening really fast through prayer.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm just as guilty as everybody else of doing. I've got to do it to prove that it's going to work. Which is only that voice inside. I often say, oh yeah, we're doing. And most of the time we're not doing what we could be doing because they say so. Rather, well, what am I doing? What is this? What is happening for me in this? Which is obviously very difficult when we're babies, when we're young. But as we come into maturity, we can just, what is that wonderful line that I hear so often in the States? Stop, drop, and roll, which is another way of saying detach, feel stillness, and observe. And it can happen really fast, can't it? In an nth of a second, if we have that choice mechanism within us, so that then we can actually feel the breath taking us into the stillness of the divine. And immediately we feel the possibility of miracles, magic happening.
That's what Jesus calls choosing again. Awesome. Do that. It's interesting you mentioned it twice, the prayer. I have so many students coming out of, I get a lot of students coming out of patriarchal religions and raised in these really almost cult-like confining religions, whether it be fundamental Baptist to LDS, when I spent some time in Utah, to various religions that it is what you make of it, right? But some families made a lot of pain and suffering out of it for their children, and I am receiving with open arms the adults that grew out of it. And when I say the prayer, they often look at me like, what's that going to be? What's that going to be like? But let me remind you that what's that word? That the nature mystics used it constantly. I remember, I think it was Richard Jeffries in The Story of My Heart who always mentioned this phrase, the prayer. And the first time he sat down on a grassy knoll and he felt his body slipping away and he felt Gaia entering from the soil deep into his firmament until he didn't even recognize firmament. You know, he wasn't, he couldn't define it. He was overwhelmed. He was overcome. But instead of saying, no, 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 he created a prayer from it. And that prayer was everything. He said, I felt it in the wind. The birds were singing it back to me. The people were smiling it in my direction. The breath was breathing it. The rivers were flowing it. And it was everywhere. And it wasn't anything that was always spoken. He was always changing the words to it. And then he'd say, oh, the words don't really matter. It just is. And that's that love of Divine Mother that comes through very quietly in the deity that we call nature.
Mm. 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 Yes, coming from the Celtic traditions, I'm reminded of an extraordinary man. I think you and I have talked about this before, John O'Donoghue, who was a Benedictine priest and actually also a Hegel scholar. So he was teaching philosophy in Heidelberg, but he was fundamentally in connection with the Gaia, and most of his prayers, or indeed poems, because all of his prayers are poems and all of his poems are prayers, arise from the wonderment of the way that we can feel our sensations pulsing and also waving as with breath, flowing through us, and that if we can get back to understanding flow in that sense, through the pulse and through the rhythm of our breath, we come back into literally allowing Divine Mother to carry us. But I'm finding in all of the work that I'm doing, I'm being asked constantly from that inner voice, whether it be the voice of my soul, the voice of my higher self, the voice of God, the voice of the angels of Atlantis, that please teach flow, because most people are not in flow. So most people are not breathing and therefore able to access the deeper realization of what we're being offered in this huge change of gear. Because it feels to me that the part of our complex, part of our concern, our stress, is the fact that we're making this shift between the doing into being, that we can't just grab for ideas. The next modality, oh my God, did you know that she's doing this? And then using that as a weapon against one. Because have you heard about quantum healing therapy or scalar technology? No, what's that? You haven't heard? Teach me what's going on. And then recognizing, well, it's another modality. Grabbing for ideas. Okay, now what are you actually really feeling in this?
Right.
It's this really interesting construct of the way that the world has contrived within us. What are you? What are you? What are you? And I'm saying, I'm not interested in what you are. I'm interested in who you are. What is your essence?
Which cannot be spoken, cannot be defined, limitless, powerful love. That's so powerful.
Isn't it? And for me, it's the great I am presence. So, teaching flow through the great I am. I am the flow of the divine. I am the shimmering light of divinity made human.
I remember the first time I saw you teach that live in person at your workshop in London, and I was surrounded by some of my students and some of my colleagues and many people just beginning the journey, and many people also like me, who are kind of midway through wherever we are and what our mind says when there's a place to be. And, at that time when we think we're learning something and people could not even really speak their name in that flow. And as you were teaching them the breath, you would teach us to say our name, I am, and then we would say our name and whatever we thought of ourselves in that brief moment. And I was observing some people just get shaky, whereas prior to beginning, you didn't see this part because you weren't there yet, but I think we had our workshops back to back in that building that day, and my students were also, oh yes, I'm so and so, hi Pamela, I'm so and so, this confidently there. But when they had to breathe and do it, later in your course, then suddenly they were like, I'm Pamela and I'm a channel, right? And you were like, no, let's stop, let's breathe it again. And it didn't take long, each of them, just after a few breaths, when they could feel what it did to the neurology of the body, when they can feel the breath and how it flows through our lungs and heart, and how it calms everything. If after just a few short moments with you, and that they seem to light up. It was like I saw the room. As a clairvoyant being, I see a lot, and I saw their auras just each one by one just light up. I don't think I ever got a chance to tell you this, and we were all standing in a little semicircle, and there was like a half circle of light, and there were pillars of light going up into the sky, and I was just, this is why I couldn't speak. I was so glad you didn't ask me to say my name, because I would have been speechless, because I was looking at the pillars of light shining through each person. And I was just like, whoa,
That's amazing. So, if I can just hover for a moment over our conversation and say, okay, everybody, can you hear what Pamela's saying? That we're talking about how can we really be the breath? Not do the breath, but how can we be the breath? Meaning, how can we feel our bodies expanding and wide through the base of the ribs, and then deep, and just sit, so that when we speak, we alter the usual. You know what? Do you know who I am? And if we drop into the breath, we come into I am Stewart, and we come right into the quest that we're all on, which is to find out, well, where is my heart? Where is the seat of the soul in my heart? And how can I resonate from there? If words arise from the heart, they enter the heart. If words arise from the tongue alone, they don't pass beyond the ears. The great Rumi. And really what we're doing is we're be the change you want to see by dropping into the council of the heart, the seat of our soul. We're really immediately healing separation, aren't we? Healing separation within us, between head and heart, or between mind and body, so to speak. And I want to go into a definition of that in a moment, because we've talked a lot about the mind. Yes. And how the mind is a bewildering and often confusing concept for people, because we think it's just here. Well, let's talk about it now. For me, how does it feel for you? It feels that mind is total, that actually it's all of my cells, my over 100 trillion cells, giving me consciousness. It's just what we tend to do is just focus here in the doing plane, as opposed to coming into the being plane and feeling, oh, if I drop in here, I can actually feel my pelvis. I can feel my sex identity center. I can feel my feet, my knees. Oh my God, I can feel my knees. This is exciting. You mean I'm beginning to become full in my sensorium? Maybe this is what my mind is. I know you could follow that.
I think you just blew everyone's mind. I could almost feel everyone going, cannot compute, ego says. This is
let's separate it all here.
Yeah. You must tell us what he just said.
This is really an ancient way of being, isn't it?
The Taoists knew this, right? Without knowing it. I could hear many dead Taoists rolling over in their grave right now as I speak that phrase, but it's what the Kabbalion masters called the all is within the all, right? So that's the most simple way I can describe that is if the universal law of one is true, everything must be within it. And we can't even say that a separate belief is outside of oneness. We all know in oneness that separation never occurred. There is no birth, there is no death, but it sure as hell feels like it when you're living it, right? So we honor the body in that sense of activating the senses that have been so dull for so long. And breath is the only, non-thing, can't call it a thing. Breath is the essence of what Christians are calling Holy Spirit, what the nature mystics called deity. what some people call God. Just it's what I suppose the Buddhists would call non-attachment when they're seeking that. It's what atheists call nothing. We all want to call it something, except it's not an it, it's an is. I believe what you're talking about is an isness. It's beyond human condition to even try to philosophize when we have a deep realization of the simplicity. It's even beyond what you're calling I am. What if that too is a human construct? It's a great place to attain, right?
Mm,
But what
mm,
happens when we get beyond that and we're going in this flow of, I just felt all my cells light up.
mm, mm,
I,
mm,
I just felt I'm beyond a cell and that I'm not a body.
mm,
And I am simultaneously, and I get the pleasure and grace of utilizing it for the most glorious bounty of returning this world to the wholeness
mm,
which it was originally designed
mm,
towards. Right?
mm, mm.
There's so much that I could talk about within that, but for the sake of time, I'll stop my diatribe.
Well, I'm remembering, and we have it on record or recording. So let's return to themes at another time. Next season in 2022, because we know also that we'll have the arousal of 2022. We just need to get through these 3 months, it seems, from an astrological perspective, because although those 4 planets are now direct, we know that Saturn and Uranus are in this sort of, I say this humorously, everybody, an unholy dance, so that they can find wholeness. But at the moment, there's a lot of oscillation, isn't there, and contraction, because it's really, really significant. But I wanted to bring in Diana as well, because she's with me so much. And I know you're completely in register with that vibrational field that she's opened for us. That one of the great things that I wanted to share with Diana was how she could ignite her radiance, so that she could feel the ignition of the radiance by bringing all her cells into harmony through pranayama, through inspiration, the holy wind. And this she did so she was able to expand and contract her aura, not through expand joy, contract fear, but just purely and simply so that she could feel herself embracing all of those people that she wanted to embrace, but then to manage her energy by then drawing the energy back into her own kinesphere, so that she never felt plundered by this. And she was really beginning to find this during the last year, stimulated largely by a remarkable meeting in Calcutta, when she went to meet Mother Teresa, who a few days before a day before actually, had to be rushed off to Rome for surgery. The Pope sort of did all of that for Mother Teresa. So Diana wasn't able to meet Mother Teresa, but the nuns took Diana into the chapel and sang Ave Maria to her and the Lord's Prayer. They sang, they didn't speak it. And she sat on the floor, cross-legged in the center of the circle. And that's when she said, something extraordinary happened to me, where I felt the Holy Spirit come into me as a gift of grace. And that's when I just knew all of the segments of me, all of the things that we've identified, you and I, meaning me, she and I, all of the things that we've identified, the multiplicitousness of that, all came into this extraordinary union where she realized, oh, now I know what I need to be. I don't need to keep doing, I shall just be. And of course, as a result, her creativity, the imagination of her creativity, or the creativity of her imagination, opened. And she started to think, oh, I'm going to do this, and I'm going to do this, and I'm going to do this. Of great fun projects of making docus that would then possibly, about a charitable endeavor that she was engaged in, that then would become a major movie. And then, of course, she was taken from us, which is to work on another level, which is also interesting. So that experience for me was a crystallizing of igniting radiance through grace. She was ready to receive. And the grace that spread through her, the Holy Spirit, Santa Maria, was so effulgent, was so vast, that it brought any of the separations into oneness.
Mm. Mm.
And I feel in that moment she became a bodhisattva. It's what we were referring to earlier. She became a living God in humanness, you know, as we see in the great masters and mistresses. I mean, you know, in Amma, we see it in Amma, and of course His Holiness the Dalai Lama.
Mm. Yes. I saw a picture of her once that always stuck in my mind, and I have no idea why. Perhaps you would have a thought on this, but she was sitting on the edge of a boat, perhaps her boyfriend's boat, and you remember that picture? And she was just staring off at the sea, and I knew she knew someone was taking her picture, and she kind of was so deeply entranced with the deity of the sea that she didn't care. And she was just shining. Do you remember that picture?
I do, I do, I do. And she was like a sprite. I mean, she was like a naiad, you know, that if she wasn't in water once a day swimming, she felt she would always go crazy, figure of speech.
Right.
So she swam every day.
Right. And I
And
just
so,
deeply
you
connected
know,
with her in that moment.
had this extraordinary connection with, always felt alive and listened a lot to, and of course, we're talking about the 90s when whale music and dolphin play intelligence was just beginning to permeate through our consciousness. But you know, I remember getting a CD, as we used then, of whale music, of whale song rather, and how she would be entranced. And she would often, because we were using Sony Walkman still then,
Yeah.
because cell phones were just really aroused. It's unusual
Yeah.
to talk about it because we think, well,
Huge.
they've been with us forever, you know,
Yeah.
and they were
Huge.
really big.
They were big and they had these antennae on them that you would pull up. You remember? And they were like this and about that wide and hanging off your head about like that. And
So she would be listening on her Sony Walkman to whale song
yeah.
and then put it down and dive in to the pool or dive into the sea and
Wow.
continue feeling the reverberation within her. It's extraordinary, you know, because we weren't awake to this subtlety of what she was really experiencing inside, because she was also committed to the public persona. But all of these things she was feeling,
Mm.
um, that we're now recognizing, this is a way of being able to ignite. Well, it's this. I mean, this feels as though we're moving, and I know you have a very important appointment to go on to, but we're moving almost to the point of finality of this conversation today, and it's lived up to its promise of being a deep dialogue, which is lovely. So thank you. But I want people to find you. So could you tell us where we need to go to find you?
Oh, Google me, Pamela Aaralyn, of course. But my favorite place to be right now is on my Patreon community. There's just a small number of students and masters there right now. We're just teaching together, learning together, walking each other home, a few times a week, and satsang and sound healings and what we call our spiritual bonfire, where we sit around and we just deeply have these kind of dialogues, and continue walking each other home. And of course, you can find all of my Christ conscious channelings and classes about, various degrees of consciousness. You know, I've been super busy, but you guys have helped me. I'm right in the middle of writing my dissertation for my PhD right now. And I attribute that to the people on Patreon, the students and masters who are walking me home by my side. So I just wanted to give a little shout out and send some love to them today. But that's just patreon.com/Pamela Aaralyn. And there's just hundreds and hundreds of works there. And some of my behind the scenes writing towards my sacred text, A Course in Forgiveness, which is also well underway. If I would ever let it stop, it might get published, but every time I want it to stop, it wants to keep going. So you'll have that hopefully soon, now that Anya's in my life, to push the crap out of me to actually get it published and to find a publisher. I'm in that stage, Stewart, where I remember you and I discussing the joys of finding the right publisher to actually do all of this. And oh boy. So that's where I am in my journey right now. And you guys can find me there most often: YouTube, Instagram, Facebook, all the right places
We'll
there.
make sure that all your links are listed underneath the recording of this deep dialogue. and we'll, you know, what we'll do is we'll send you a recording of it when it's up on my YouTube channel, so everybody can interlink and do all those wonderful sort of fertilization things. This has been amazing, and I don't want you to go, but I know you have to go, and I have to go as well. But you know, in this moment of time, this moment of blissful eternality, I just want to thank you from the bottom of my heart and the real depths of my soul. It's just, I love sharing space with you. I want to thank you for all that you've contributed to our conversation.
I'd
Bless you,
love
bless
to do it more regularly. Reach out anytime. You know where I am. Guys, if you want more of Stewart, let me know. And we love sharing the screen together. He's an incredibly profound being, as you can likely feel just from being around him today. So don't hesitate to reach out with his links as well for anyone who's watching on my channel. You know, his books are incredible, particularly this one. I love this one so much, and I felt Diana's essence so strongly. And when he was writing it, I remember when we had our first dialogue about it, which is also on my channel. At that point, I didn't even know what to say. I'm like, this book is beyond my critique. I can't even say how good it is. Like, I couldn't even, oh, I felt so ashamed afterwards. I'm like, I'm sorry, Stuart. I mean, I promise you I read it, but it's just so incredible. I don't know what to say.
Oh, I mean, well, I mean, you can just imagine how that makes me feel. I know in that
I
moment.
hope to give better critique as more of a
Oh, no, no,
philosophical
no,
thing.
no, no. I mean, you got it, you know, because
It goes like, come on, say something better, Pamela, you know?
moved into the field of nothingness, you know.
Yeah.
It's rather like, I always remember my first book, I was so proud of it, being a profound dyslexic, the synesthete,
Oh,
of going to the Swami that I was working with at that time and giving it to him. And he did this.
yeah.
It's very good.
Oh,
And
oh,
I
oh,
said,
yeah, yeah, he does that.
"Oh."
The lamas do that. The swamis do that. Yeah.
And he said, well, I just read it. And I said, so what's it about? And then there's a story attached to it, but I know we have to go. So everybody, don't worry. There will be all sorts of wonderful links so that you can get hold of this treasured human being who is an extraordinary mystic, as you can see. I know we both send huge love to you, and through the unfolding nature of namaste, 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 namaste.